Hey everybody, it's Magic Prepper, and I want to share with you my long-range rifle project that I was trying to put together on a relatively affordable budget to give everybody an idea as to whether or not this is something obtainable for the average prepared citizen out there. And I think that it's quite a good rifle for the price point. This is the Ruger American Predator chambered in .308 Winchester, aka 7.62x51 NATO, because we like to stick to those ubiquitous cartridges here in the preparedness community. Now, the reason I put this together was because I was lacking in the department of longer range, and I wanted to find out if going more affordable would still provide me with the results required and give me more room to work with when it came to buying an optic or accessorizing the rifle as a whole. So we're going to talk about the cost and the components of everything included in this rifle today. We're going to show you some accuracy testing to give you some ideas about what cartridges this rifle prefers. We'll talk about some of the philosophy of use in the sense of why I wanted a long-range bolt-action rifle in order to either provide sustenance or perhaps some level of defense depending on the situation. And then I'll give you my final thoughts as to what I found during this project period of building out this rifle that might help you make some decisions for yourself moving forward into the future. Now, before we get going, I do need to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. And of course, I was able to put this project together thanks to them. And just about everything that I talk about today regarding this rifle you can find from Midway USA. So huge thanks to them for supporting the channel and what I do here. All right, so first off, let's talk about the base of this rifle. This is a Ruger American Predator chambered in .308 Winchester, which is a $500 rifle. And in all honesty, for $500, it comes with a lot of features you don't necessarily find on other $500 rifles, which is why I chose this particular rifle for the platform of this project. Now, I'm not going to get into the real nitty-gritty technical specs of this rifle because that's easily sourced information if you decide this is something you're interested in. But I'm going to tell you about why I found this to be high in value and why it might be a good choice if you're on a budget but want something that can take things out a little bit further. So first off, it has an 18-inch cold hammer forged barrel that has a heavy-ish profile. And when I say heavy-ish, what I mean is it has a tapered heavy profile, which is heavier at the action and lighter at the muzzle. So you don't get a true bull barrel or a true heavy barrel, but it is heavier than a standard profile barrel. So that's something to consider when it comes to higher round counts and maintaining accuracy through additional cycle rates and everything else. But another thing that it has is a threaded barrel in the sense of it has a 5/8x24 thread pitch on the end of the muzzle, which you don't necessarily always find with your budget bolt action rifles. So that allows me to attach a muzzle device, which then you can change to a brake or a flash hider or use as a way to attach a suppressor. So a lot of value just in the barrel itself that you don't get with other $500 rifles. It has your standard bolt action. The bolt is not very smooth, but it's still workable. So it's not something you're going to feel upset about if you're at this price point. But compared to higher end bolt action rifles, you're going to notice the difference of how not smooth this action is. But guess what? It still works, it still does the job, and I don't have any issues cycling the action, so, you know, it's something you have to deal with. It also comes with a Picatinny rail right on top. You can actually switch it out for a 20 MOA rail if you need additional elevation adjustment, but it's nice that you already have a pick rail there, so it's a lot easier to attach optics. You don't have to worry about obscure or proprietary optic mounts. It's just ready to go right from the factory. It also has a detachable flush fit magazine. Now, there's some other models out there that come with an AICS magazine and some others that take STANAG magazines and all kinds of stuff depending on what cartridge you're looking for and everything else. But the model I bought at $500 came with a flush fit magazine that it worked and there's nothing really wrong with it, but that changed very quickly if you can't tell, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. So all in all, for what you got in the package, it was definitely worth $500, at least in my opinion. The stock was not very good, but it's extremely lightweight. So you have a very lightweight rifle from the factory, but that stock had to go because it was so lightweight, it just wasn't even comfortable to shoot and it just felt flimsy. So I wanted to change that out. So before we get into all that stuff, just be aware of the fact that at $500, that Ruger American Predator really brings a lot to the table you don't get with other $500 rifles. Also, keep in mind that there's a huge aftermarket for the Ruger American Rifle series, which means you're going to find more accessories and more options when it comes to getting everything put together. So $500 rifle is how we started this project. The next thing I did was get rid of the stock, like I just said, because it was just flimsy and lightweight wise, it was good. And in fact, I still have the stock in case I decide to go do some hunting or something and I don't want to carry around a much heavier situation, which I've induced at this point. But at the same time, just for shooting and trying to be accurate, and especially when it comes to longer range precision, that stock was just not adequate for that. So right here we have the Magpul Hunter American stock in, I believe it's sniper gray. It might be urban gray, but either way, I just rather it be just gray. Either way, I like this stock a lot. It brings a lot to the table, and it's $285. So that does raise some concerns in the sense of, well, that $500 budget rifle just jumped up quite a bit in price. That it did. So that's one of the things where I actually might have made a mistake. And when I say that, what I mean is the fact that you can actually buy this setup pretty much exactly the way you see it right here. And it comes with the American Hunter stock. And it's just called the Ruger American Hunter. And you get the stock and you also get a muzzle brake, whereas this just came with a thread cap, right? Or a thread protector. So you get a stock and a muzzle brake with that setup, and it's $760. Whereas buying the stock separate from the original rifle at $500 and $285 is $785. So you would have saved $25 had you bought the rifle in that configuration to begin with, plus you would have gotten a muzzle brake, which has a level of value to it as well. So I probably should have just taken that route, even though it's nice to have the other stock in case I decide I want to lighten things up for going out in the field. I would have probably just dealt with it and not even known the difference had I just jumped right to the Ruger American Hunter. So if you can't afford the stock, because that is a substantial upgrade, the other setup with the rifle at $500, it has a stock already. You could get by with that 100%. I'm not trying to argue that. I just found that I needed something a little bit more substantial. And this brings more to the equation in the sense of how I can mount accessories and stuff like that too. So the stock, great upgrade. I like Magpul. It has adjustable length of pull, which is really nice. It's a nice solid stock. And the best part about adding the Hunter stock is you get the removable AICS box style magazines, which you don't get with the original Ruger American with its flush fit. It's like almost like kind of like a rotary mag the way it's set up, and it works 100%. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's definitely not an AICS magazine. These come in 5 rounds, which is what it comes with when you buy the stock, or if you were to buy the Ruger American Hunter all set up already. But you can also get these in 10 rounds, and they're single stack. So a 10 round is almost the same size as like a 20 round SR25 style mag, but it's much easier to get rounds back in the rifle. It's much easier to carry additional rounds. And these are just superior magazines for the most part. Now, what I did find, just so you're aware, is that with this AICS magazine, if you load it to all 5 rounds, sometimes it has an issue getting the bolt into battery. And I don't know if it's because of the upward pressure of the magazine and everything else with the spring pushing up on those rounds. But this one I load to 4 rounds and I don't have a single issue. But once I put that 5th in, it can give me problems sometimes chambering that first round. So keep that in mind in case this is something you're looking to do. The magazine, a huge bonus of getting this stock set up, in my opinion. So that's the stock I chose. It's much heavier, much heavier. This quickly becomes not as expedient when it comes to running around in the field with it for a hunt or whatever it might be. But it is a much more stable shooting platform and a much more substantial stock, which has a cheek riser, and it just ergonomically is much nicer to shoot. So there are compromises, of course. Now, I will mention that this particular cheek riser does get in the way of your bolt sometimes. It's not hard to deal with, but it is something that if you were to put this on your Ruger American Predator and try to take your bolt out to clean it, you would suddenly realize you're facing yourself with an issue. So let's see here. We'll pop the bolt out, okay? And as you can see, if you go upside down and put the angle of the bolt towards the cheek riser, the bolt can come right out. So it's not the end of the world. That is an issue a lot of people bring up about this setup, but you just have to flip it upside down. And then while you're getting ready to go, you have your scope kind of wanting to be in the way. This is all stuff we figure out, I promise. But now that I'm on camera, aha, there we go. I can't do it. So there's a little bit of a gap there with the scope, with the ocular lens and everything else going on here with the cheek rest, but it is doable and it's something that's not that big of an issue. But it is something people will tell you about online if you're looking for information about this. Just be aware that you just flip it upside down and you're good to go. Now, we have a Harris SLM bipod here, a 9 to 13 inch, and it's attached to a sling stud. So it's not like a pick mount or anything, it's just a sling stud mount. I like Harris bipods. They're sturdy, they do the job, they've been doing it for decades now, and they're high quality, American made, bipod. So really no issues there. And they don't have as much flex like a Magpul bipod does. So they're a little better in the department of making sure things are a little more rigid. So I like Harris bipods, and this one is $117. So it's an expensive bipod, but not that much more than like the Magpul ones. And it's aluminum and it's strong. So no issues there. And the 9 to 13 is just me needing a little bit of a taller bipod. If I was sitting at a bench or something like this, I'm just tall. So it's hard for me to get behind a 6 to 9 as easily. 9 to 13 is where it's at for me personally. Now, the muzzle brake you see here on the M is a Silencer Co. ASR brake. It's a 5/8 by 24 thread pitch. And it's a muzzle brake only because I just had it. Flash hiders are a little bit nicer for everybody else around you, but muzzle brakes do decrease the recoil, and they kind of create like a sacrificial baffle type scenario once you run your suppressor on there. But the main purpose of this was specifically to attach my suppressor, and shooting this gun suppressed is amazing. Now this muzzle brake's $80, and that's because it's proprietary and it has a silencer attachment on the end, which is made for quick detach of the Omega 300 I have right here. But you could get a muzzle brake for this much cheaper, of course, if you just wanted recoil reduction, or you could get the, Magpul American Hunter set up the way it is from the factory with the stock and everything, and we already have a muzzle brake. So that's not necessarily a cost you have to have, but if you want to be able to QD a Silencer Co. suppressor, then you do. And honestly, shooting this gun suppressed is amazing. There's one thing I will say. You shoot a bolt action suppressed, it feels great. I mean, there's no gas coming out at you. It feels very quiet because there's no cycling of an action or anything else. It really is the way to go. And one thing you can say is, even though an 18-inch barrel doesn't get maximum velocity from the 308 cartridge, once you throw a suppressor on the end, it gets a little bit long. So saving that 2 inches off a 20-inch barrel can help a little bit if you're planning on running suppressed, which I was. Not to mention this barrel came threaded, which many of them don't. So that's why some of these compromises are acceptable, at least in my opinion. Now, we also have the Magpul MS1 rifle sling. This is just a sling I threw on here. It fits with the Magpul stock well. As you can see, there's got this attachment point on the stock back here where you can just thread the sling through. And then I have a QD attachment point over here on this side. And that's just so I can take it on and off easily and just to give it somewhere to be attached to towards the front of the rifle. Now, in order to make that work, I used an AR Stoner M-Lock QD sling mount, which was 15 bucks. And in order to get the Harris bipod attached, to use an AR Stoner M-Lock bipod mount, which was 20 bucks. They're really inexpensive mounts. Are they going to be as high quality as something like Midwest Industries would put out? Probably not, but are they going to do the basic job of being able to hold on to your sling or your bipod on a bolt action rifle that you're not necessarily running and gunning with? I mean, so far they've worked perfectly fine for that. So that's kind of why I went ahead and just bought budget-friendly attachments in that regard. And now let's talk about the optic, because that's kind of important, right? This is the Vortex Strike Eagle 3 to 18 with a 44 millimeter objective lens, and it's the first focal plane model. So this is $750. Now, it's got a 34 millimeter tube. It's got a zero stop elevation adjustment. It's got a capped windage adjustment on the side. It's mil radiant. It uses the EBR7 MRAD reticle, which is actually a really nice Christmas tree style reticle. But what's really nice about this, and it has, 0.1 mil radiant adjustments. So it's kind of everything you want in like a long range style scope, but at a decent price point. At $750, it definitely provides a lot of value in that class. Now, you could go much cheaper. For example, you get a primary arms 3 to 18, 44 millimeter objective lens with a 30 millimeter tube, and its first focal plane, and I think the SLX models of that particular scope are like $300. So you could save some money if you wanted to get a lesser quality optic, which might have been okay to do based on the fact that this is still not like a super high-end optic, right? So we're still like at mid-tier here. And, at what point are you getting diminishing returns, right? So it's something to consider for sure. But I wanted a good quality optic, not just so that I could feel good about its capability at longer ranges, but because I wanted to learn more about shooting at longer ranges, and I needed to learn more about ranging using mil radians, and I needed to just understand how a higher magnification optic could really be beneficial. And this optic has done a good job of showing me that. So at $750, I think it's a pretty good optic. You get a first focal plane reticle, which is a very usable reticle. It's illuminated. You have your side adjustment parallax focus on the side, which I said completely wrong, but that's okay. And it does have a zero stop. So you actually have to remove the turret to set your zero stop. And then the only thing weird about the Vortex zero stop, at least on this model, is that it kind of stops you from being able to lower your elevation by, I think, as far as it'll let you go is like 5 millirads, which in most scenarios probably isn't really a big deal, but it is something that if you're a long range precision shooter, it might bother you in case you want to be able to make those adjustments. So that's just something to keep in mind. But for my purposes, no issues at all. It comes with the sunshade, it comes with bikini scope caps. It came with the throw lever here, which, you know, this is a little bit tougher, but it's like not as bad as some scopes I've seen. The glass quality is perfectly serviceable. In fact, I find it to be pretty good, especially at $750. So the Strike Eagle line is interesting because it's kind of like they want to be tactical, but they still want to provide value. And of course, a lot of people, you know, make fun of the Strike Eagles, like the 1-6 and the 1-8 and stuff. In all reality, like they're good optics, but of course they're not going to be your $1,800 Night Forces, but that's why they don't cost $1,800, right? And this is not going to be like a Trijicon 10 mile 3-18, for example, but it's only $750 instead of, I don't know how much those cost, $1,600 right now. So it all is relevant, right? It's been a very good scope for me. Clearly I can get accurate hits with it, as I'm about to show you here, but honestly, for learning how to shoot long range and for learning how to range with the Milradian reticle and everything else, Vortex Strike Eagle 3-18 by 40 or 44 millimeter objective that has a first focal plane reticle has been completely solid for me. No complaints at all, and I like it quite a bit. Now, in order to mount it to the rifle, I actually use the Vortex Pro Picatinny rings, which are 34 millimeter, right? Because that's the tube diameter, and they're the medium height rings, and they were $80. So they're high quality rings designed specifically for Vortex optics. They actually have the torque value on the rings engraved right there for you, so it's kind of idiot proof in the sense of mounting. And I just wanted to kind of use some higher end optics mounts for this particular project to make sure we had a good sturdy optics mounting system, and everything's been really good in that regard. So that's the whole package. And like I said, I'm not going to get into super technical details or nitty gritty, right? Like I could tell you a million other things about this scope, like, oh, the adjustable diopter or this or that. It's not really going to help you make those decisions if that's something that you're trying to figure out. It's going to give you some basic understanding as to like the specifications, but you can find all that information out. For example, this is not a very lightweight scope. I don't know the weight off the top of my head right this second, but I do know that it's pretty heavy. But it's a 34 millimeter tube and it's a pretty big high level magnification optic. So what do you expect, right? Everything's a compromise, but I like this optic, and at $750, it's performing pretty well. Now, the total package, everything you see here, the way it's set up right now with optics and everything included, is $1,918. Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot for starting out trying to build a budget long-range rifle. That's, you know, we're almost at $2,000, and so you go back and you start thinking about where you could have saved more money, and I could have saved more money on the optic, like I said. I could have bought a primary arms with a similar magnification range, similar capabilities. I don't know if the glass quality would be the same or not, but what I do know is that it would have been $300 instead of $750, right? So that's $450 saved just right there in the optic, and I might have had the same level of capability. I don't know that for a fact because I don't have that other optic, but I'm just saying that's a possibility. Could have saved money. I didn't need to run it suppressed. I could have left the muzzle brake completely off. That's $80 right there, but it does enhance the shooting of this rifle. Running it suppressed is awesome, and for the capabilities of hunting or defensive measures in an SHTF scenario or a preparedness-based scenario, a suppressor is very, very useful, right? I didn't need the Magpul stock. That's $285 right there, but I sure wanted it after I shot the other stock quite a bit. I realized it was just too lightweight and this wasn't going to give me what I wanted from the rifle. So everything adds up, and there are some considerations I want to make based on that. So let's go ahead, shoot this rifle. I'm going to show you how it groups. I want to give you some ideas about the accuracy expectations of this rifle. And then I want to talk to you about my overall thoughts of the build and the rifle itself, and of course the cost, to give you some ideas about, you know, things I might have changed my mind on or other considerations to make if you're looking to do something similar. All right, let's get some groups with this rifle. We have a target set up at 100 yards, ready to go. We're going to test out 3 different .308 Winchester ammunition types to find out if this rifle can deliver on the accuracy you would desire, even at its price point. And those 3 ammunition types are going to be 150 grain jacketed soft points from AAC Ammunition, which is one of the cheaper ammunition types that I could find. And we also have 165 grain bonded jacketed soft points from Federal Fusion, and 178 grain ELDX precision hunter rounds from Hornady. Now, I have 3 different weights because generally guns just tend to like different grain weights better or different loading. So we're going to try these out, see what kind of groups we can get. And the first ammunition type up is going to be Hornady ELDX Precision Hunter rounds at 178 grains. And we're using all hunting ammunition because this rifle is primarily built for hunting, and it has bleed over in the sense of preparedness when it comes to other reasons you might want a long range rifle. So let's start it off. We're going to do 5 rounds of each and just see what kind of groups we can get. And I am not a precision long range rifle shooter, so this is just my capability as well we have to consider here. Starting off with the Hornady. All right. Now we will move on to the Federal Fusion. All right, we got the Federal Fusion rounds loaded up here. Let's give it a go. My first shots there, not looking that great, but you know what? Like I said, I'm not a precision rifle shooter, so we're just gonna see what someone like myself, an average guy, can produce with this rifle, and maybe ammunition can help us have a little bit of a crutch, right? So, Federal Fusion, let's see what we can do. I'll tell you one thing, that was a bullseye. All right. And of course I dropped the last one. Otherwise, that was about the best group I ever had at 100 yards, to be honest. But well, we had a little bit of a flyer on that last one, probably because of pressure. But let's move on to the AAC 150 grain jacketed soft points and see how that goes. All right, the AAC ammo is loaded up, and honestly, this is the cheapest ammo we're testing out today. I think this was like $15 for the box of 20, so let's see how it does. I mean, I think affordability is always good, especially if you still get good performance, but it's possible this rifle doesn't like 150 grain projectiles. So let's find out, but that 165 Fusion blew the Hornady out of the water, so who knows how this is gonna perform next to that. that's pretty lights out actually. So we have a good target that I'm pretty proud of here. We're gonna have to check out, but honestly, for the price, this stuff was pretty accurate. This stuff was really good. And then honestly, the Hornady, which is the most expensive of the three, not impressed, at least with this rifle, right? Every rifle's different. You can't blame the cartridge as being a bad cartridge because it doesn't run well in one particular firearm. But for this firearm, I'm done with this ammo basically. But let's go take a look. I'll show you the target. We can just kind of go over expectations when it comes to the accuracy of this rifle. And then I'll just close everything out with my overall thoughts and some considerations to make and maybe some regrets I had while working on this project. All right, so these are some of the better targets I've had this year, in all honesty. So we have the Hornady 178 grain ELDX rounds coming in at 3.25 MOA, and I use these calipers right here to get the measurements, and you can see that it's just not the best group in general. And at first I thought it was just gonna be the way I was shooting and how bad I am at being a rifle shooter, I guess, but turns out that wasn't the case. So 3.25 MOA, and if we eliminated this little flyer off to the side here, then the MOA showing between the 4-shot group would have been 2.15, which is more acceptable, but not necessarily what we're looking for. Then we'll jump over here to the Federal Fusion, 165 grain bonded jacketed soft points, and you can see that this is a really tight group, but of course we had a flyer. So, and honestly, these flyers are probably shooter error more than anything else, but we still need to know that data. So this is a 1.25 MOA group, thanks to that little flyer there, which, you know, I know for a fact is my fault, as you can see, right? But if you eliminate that flyer, we got a 0.6 MOA group. So that's sub MOA for a rifle that started its life out as a $500 rifle, right? And then we also had the AAC 150 grain jacketed soft point, the cheapest ammunition of the day, by far much cheaper than the Hornady. Just good old 150 grain jacketed soft points over here performing at the exact same accuracy level as the Federal Fusion 165 grain bonded jacketed soft points. So we had a 1.25 MOA group, which you can kind of see right here, right? There we are, okay? And then we have a 0.6 MOA group if you eliminate this one little flyer here. And these flyers could easily have been me, right? I could have easily dropped that shot just because both of these groups, that was the 5th shot. I don't know what else to say. I think it was anticipation, or maybe it was just fatigue, or who knows what, but the flyer really ruined the really nice tight group, and I don't think I would blame that on the rifle or the ammunition. I think that's Magic Prepper. So, in all honesty, at least in my opinion, from my skill level, 100% acceptable accuracy from a rifle of that price point, in my opinion, right? It's a cold hammer forged barrel, 18 inches, a 1 in 10 right-hand twist rate, and it just does the job like you would expect from a good quality bolt action, right? Maybe not with the heavier stuff, but hey, this might give you an idea of what ammunition to try out if you have a Ruger American Predator in 308 as well. Either way, let's wrap this video up with just some final thoughts, some things that I might regret about this project in the sense of just considering the cost and price and everything else, and just give you some ideas about where that bolt action falls into my preparedness inventory. All right, so final thoughts on the Ruger American Predator long range build out we have right here, because I want to make sure to share my ideas with everybody and to give you some of my perceived mistakes maybe, so that way you can avoid them yourself, or just give you something else to consider when you're trying to put something together similar to what I have here, okay? So at $1,918, right? Almost $2,000. It's a really nice rifle. Like, I don't have any complaints about it. It does a great job. It's clearly very accurate, right? Or at least capable of good accuracy, especially with somebody like myself shooting it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if a true long-range precision shooter could even push it further. But in all reality, it's a perfectly capable rifle. The optic is a good optic. I have really no complaints there. You could complain about the glass quality if you wanted compared to something in the $2,000 range, but at that point, that's an obvious difference, right? So like for $750, it's an excellent scope. I have no complaints at all. But for the whole package at $2,000, here's just some things to consider and thoughts that I've had go through my head regarding this particular rifle. I could have gotten a gas gun for less than $2,000. For example, the Ruger S-FAR is like $1,000 right now. Okay, I mean, yeah, the S-FAR has had a couple of issues brought up by channels like Hop, who does a great job of explaining his S-FAR journey, but he's also mentioned that he really likes the Ruger S-FAR. And what you get with the Ruger S-FAR is a gas operated 308 Winchester that's in the same package and similar weight class to an AR-15, while having all the same manual of arms. And then you throw an optic on it, and you already have a really capable setup without having to buy a new stock like this one, at least, right? Like $285 worth of furniture right here, right? And with having the versatility of an AR-10, aka you're out shooting your 308 and you're still using the same manual of arms as your 5.56. You're still running a similar system, aka there are some parts compatibility compromises when it comes to an AR-15 and AR-10. Like, there's a lot of similarities there that's beneficial for preparedness, right? Not to mention, a semi-automatic platform allows you to get more rounds downrange on target faster. Now, will it be as accurate? Will it be as, let's just say, pleasant to shoot? Possibly not. But you could get a Ruger S-FAR and a decent optic and still save $600 to $700 off of what I have right here, right? So, keeping all that in mind, I'm not saying I wouldn't have done what I did here, but I definitely have some of those, I'm not gonna call them regrets per se, but I do think that there's something to be said about what it took for me to get this rifle to where I really wanted it to be, and what I could have just had for the same amount of cost. At $2,000, I mean, you know, a 6 Sauer 716i is an excellent 308 gas operated rifle. Really, probably the best AR-10 you can buy for the money. And I think they're about $1,600. And I could have thrown a red dot on that. And yeah, I'm not getting long range precision out of that, but like, you'd have a really capable 308 at that point. Or I could have thrown that $300 primary arms optic I told you about before. And now we're at the same price point, but I've got a 6 Sauer 716i tread, which might not be as accurate as this, but man, does it have a lot more capability. And you're still remaining on your manual of arms for your 5.56 defensive rifle. So those are the considerations that I put together. You could also apply that towards any other bolt action. You could apply that towards getting a higher end bolt action rifle and say, well, this whole setup's $2,000. Why don't I just spend $1,500 on a really nice bolt action rifle, and then, you know, buy a decent optic for the time being, and then just upgrade that as time goes on. And you could do that 100%. So it's all based on what you're trying to accomplish. But this is what I did. This was my approach to getting a long range capable rifle on a budget that, you know, ended up getting expensive, but everything is still relatively affordable in the grand scheme of things. When it comes to this optic being $750, well, it's a really nice optic at that price point. It's definitely not a $2,000 optic, but that would have blown the total cost of this package out of the water. This stock wasn't a requirement, but it made the rifle so much more functional and so much more accurate, at least when it came to shooting off the bench, not to mention removable box magazines that you can buy more of and you can load up and have readily available. There's just a trade-off with everything you do. I like this rifle a lot. I have zero complaints about it. It's a good rifle. And so I think mission accomplished, but I just wanted to share those thoughts with everybody in case you're looking to do something similar, because there's a lot of considerations to make when you're spending that kind of money. And what I started out with in the sense of a $500 rifle quickly became a $2,000 package. And yeah, it's capable of what I want it to be able to do. Now, I would call this an 800-meter rifle or an 800-yard rifle, right? This is what a friend of mine told me specifically, who is a long-range precision shooter. He looked at this gun, set up the way it is right now. I haven't taken it out that far yet because I generally don't have access to that long of a range, and I also just am not even quite there yet when it comes to capability. But what I will say is that someone who is very proficient in that area specifically told me that he would call this an 800-yard gun, no problem. And you know what? I feel pretty good about that, because I don't know if there's any shots I'd be taking anytime soon that are longer than 800 yards. So let me know if you have any questions below. Let me know your budget rifle selections when it comes to building something that's more for longer ranges. So that way I can have some ideas too about what I could have done differently if I was to approach this again at another time, or, you know, what optics you might suggest that would have been much less expensive. But keep in mind, you do get what you pay for generally when it comes to a lot of this stuff. And this Strike Eagle at $750, at least from what I can tell, seems to be punching up for its weight class versus something that's $300 that is $300. You know what I mean? So Let me know all that information. I'm curious about it. This is my first attempt at like a longer range rifle, and I think I did pretty good. But you know, I just had all those secondary thoughts based on the total overall cost of the package. Anything else you need from me, go to magicprepper.com. Feel free to support me over on Subscribestar for $5 a month if that's something you're interested in. We have exclusive content over there. I have preparedness incentives, and for this month, which I'm releasing this video in December, I actually have a pretty big package from Midway USA going out to one particular recipient. So keep that in mind if that's something you're willing to do. I got links down below in the description as well as in the pinned comment. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.